And now, coming to you live from Shenango Valley Studios, the most talked about live show in the Shenango Valley, because it's one of the only live shows in the Shenango Valley, brought to you by Sheets Run and Done. Your host, Sean Zippi, with the Zip Code. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, I kind of almost matched my background there. Nice. Folks, today is a good day. And that is because we have a gentleman by the name of Ben Jones coming on the show. StateCollege.com, Penn State Athletics beat writer. So I hope to get some inside information from this gentleman. So if you like Penn State football, if you just like athletics in general, we should be well on our way with the show tonight. You should enjoy it. And just a couple quick things before we begin. I want to thank everybody for meeting the challenge of 1,500 followers on Instagram. So thank you very much. We appreciate it. We appreciate everybody who shared that for us as well. And I want to let you know that we will be doing another giveaway. Since we got to 1,500 followers on Instagram, we will be doing another giveaway over the next few days. So if you stay tuned to the zip code, we will be doing a giveaway, and you can be a part of that giveaway. Very, very simple instructions, so stay tuned for that. All right, without further ado, let's bring in Ben Jones. Bring him in here. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in tonight. Let's see. There we go. We should be able to add. State College native.
There we go.
Ben, what's up, man?
Yo, thanks for having me. I appreciate the Sheets sponsorship.
Oh.
Like, right in the middle of the state, it's like half Wawa, half Sheets. So I definitely appreciate the Sheets. It's a good sub.
Heck yeah, man. Heck yeah. Well, I'll get into that in a second. But nice Chance the Rapper poster behind you, man.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, we do a lot of Zoom calls with players. And originally I was going to find a place somewhere else in the house to do those calls with, so I'd look more professional. And then they kept being like, hey, those are nice Chance posters. So I feel very hip despite being, feels like twice their age. Not quite, but it's up there.
Hey, number one, you are hip. Number two, that shows that you're hip with that Chance the Rapper poster behind you. And number three, this is a very hip show, So yeah. Here we are.
Yeah, no, we're being hip together. I appreciate you helping me out on that.
Absolutely, man. And there are viewers, I know for a fact, that will appreciate that Chance the Rapper poster. So we're well on our way with the show, man. I'm already loving it. So let me just kind of give you the rundown of the show, Ben. So we're going to address a bunch of Penn State stuff. We'll talk some Penn State athletics. We'll talk about what you do for a living. And then we'll get into a segment called the Rapid Fire Round, which I'm going to throw a bunch of random stuff at you. You'll then answer those at the top of your, whatever comes to the top of your mind. They're all very safe questions. And I'm also going to throw at you another little bonus round, and that is called Buy or Sell. So I've only done that with a few guests. So, but you know what? Tonight is a good night for Buy or Sell as well. So I'm gonna add that in as well. Hey, Ben, just real fast. We just had a comment. It said, love the Chance the Rapper poster. So look at you, man.
I'm already super hip.
Yeah. So you graduated from State College area high school, correct?
Yep.
And then you went to Penn State.
Yes.
So you are born and bred Penn State.
Yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, my parents didn't go to Penn State. So when we moved here, I had a different than the sort of traditional upbringing when you go to games and everything. Like I'd been to a couple games and stuff like that and sort of followed the program. But since my parents were Penn State alum, it was a little different. They were not as diehard about the whole thing. But certainly, I mean, you can't grow up here and not be, surrounded by all of that. There's no doubt.
Yeah. So what's the when I kind of think of people that live in State College, do you think that the majority of them really embrace the Penn State culture? Or do you think some people are like, I want to go to a different college?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a little bit of both. I think for the most part, when you have a really successful high major college football team and really the only show in town, everyone's going to be, attracted to that experience. But at the same time, there are definitely people that kind of like to get out of the nest and everything, if you will. But the big thing is, honestly, for a lot of people that grow up here, a lot of our parents worked for the university in one way or another, and you get a big discount. So there's a certain amount of like, sure, I'd love to go to MIT, but for 75% off, you're going to go to Penn State kind of deal. So there's a little bit of both ways there.
Yeah, and hey, even if you did want to go somewhere, if you ended up at Penn State, that ain't too bad, my friend.
Yeah, not
So,
too shabby.
yeah, and you, what kind of degree did you graduate with from Penn State?
My degree's in political science.
Okay.
So not the conventional sort of thing. I was sort of one of those, you start out doing one thing, you kind of figure out what you should be doing, but it costs too much money and too much time to go back and do it all over again. So, and it's such a, your work speaks for itself and the connections speak for themselves. So once you kind of get your foot in the door, then the rest of it sort of takes care of itself. If you're fortunate, and I was fortunate.
So how'd you get into the journalism realm, so to speak?
I just always kind of liked writing. And then I had some time one summer and I remember because I live blogged. I was thinking about this because I was thinking about this show. I live blogged the Penguins and the Red Wings in the Stanley Cup Finals for like 6 people. There was like not a lot of people showed up over the court. I could probably look now and the traffic's up to 7, but just for something to do. And I kind of liked it. And then I started writing about Penn State because it was the thing in town. If you're going to write about sports in a college town, you might as well write about the college team that's there. And it's funny when I think about the fact that I live blog the Penguins because I'm a big Philly guy. So I've got no love for the Penguins, but they were on TV, so that worked for me. And then I just knew some people in town that kind of connected me with some other people, and then I'd been blogging, and that sort of grew and grew and grew. And then by the time I was done, the place that I had part-time for, they're like, well, we'll hire you once you graduate, and that's where I am today.
Folks, we're on the zip code right now with Ben Jones, Penn State Athletics beat writer for statecollege.com. And thank you, Sheets, for the sponsorship. Sheets Run and Done. But an interesting thing about Sheets is I think Sheets in State College, the last time we were at a game last fall, my buddies, my brother and I were walking around, and we saw a Sheets store downtown. I think that may be one of the only sheet stores in the country, maybe, where there's just no gas station. It's just a sheet store. You think that's correct?
Yeah, I would believe that. I mean, I'm sure. I feel like there's always got to be one more, but I've never seen one like that. They were going to put like a roof deck on it at one point. There is a second floor. I don't know why you would go because no one's ever been like, let's go on a date to Sheets. I mean, maybe I don't like judge people. We don't want to like harass the sponsorship here, but it's definitely an experience in that one.
Yeah, don't say no. I mean, I'm sure there are many, many, many dates to Sheets, and I mean after this show, there probably will be many, many more dates to Sheets. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, so we won't judge.
Yeah. So, folks, we're going to get on with the show here. Ben Jones actually has a rather large Twitter following. Ben, what's your Twitter if people want to follow you on there?
It's Ben_Jones88.
All right, and he posts a lot of stuff, a lot of up-to-date stuff about Penn State football, Penn State basketball, Penn State athletics in general. I want to get to something that you actually covered recently, Ben. This is a bunch of awards that could possibly come to some Penn State players' way. I'm going to read a list here. We got the Blitnikoff Award for the most outstanding receiver. That potentially could go to Pat Freiermuth. He's on the watch list. Folks, these are all watch list players. The Butkus Award, top linebacker, Micah Parsons. The Doak Walker Award, top running back, Journey Brown and Noah Kane, which that's pretty exciting. You got 2 running backs on the watch list from the same team. The Horning Award, most versatile college football player, Journey Brown. Lou Groza Award, top place kicker, Jake Pinniger. Mackey Award, top tight end, Pat Freiermuth. Thorpe Award, top defensive back, Lamont Wade. Folks, Lamont Wade is from Clareton, and Journey Brown is from Meadville. So if you're watching around the Shenango Valley, we're very familiar with those two schools. O'Brien Award, top quarterback, Sean Clifford. Nagurski Trophy, top defensive player, Micah Parsons and Shaka Tony. And then the Benera Award, top defensive player for potential for Micah Parsons as well. Ben, that's a heck of a list, man.
Yeah, there's. I think all the seasons are going to get canceled, but watch list canceled. That happens no matter what. Yeah, I mean, I think it speaks to the amount of talent they've got on both sides of the ball. I think, it's pretty easy to picture Pat Fryermuth and Micah Parsons bringing home some of those awards. They probably are. Tight end is a little subjective, but you could say that Pat Fryermuth probably the top tight end or top three tight ends in the country right now, and Micah Parsons certainly. If he played like he did in the Cotton Bowl with, I think it was 14 tackles, 2 forced fumbles, and a couple of sacks, he plays like that. He's almost the obligatory defensive player that gets that Heisman conversation nod. So I think all those guys, and Journey Brown and that running back room, honestly, if you told me that Journey Brown, Devin Ford, or Noah Kane were the best back in that room this year, you could believe all three of them because they were just so good, especially when they're healthy. But Journey Brown was the best guy season, week 1 to week 13. So really any of those guys could win it. But, if I had to bet on them, I'd probably pick, Pat and Micah at this point.
Yeah, and that was the nice thing about last year is Noah Kane, he was just a beast for a while. Then all of a sudden, Journey Brown just absolutely takes off. And, and like you said, in that bowl game, Micah Parsons was unbelievable. But, I think if there is a season, I think they got some tremendous potential. I'm excited as a fan. Obviously, who knows about if they're going to allow 25% of the people in Beaver Stadium, or if they're not going to allow any fans, or even if there is a season. Obviously, all that's up in the air. But if there is a season, they got a decent squad. And for Sean Clifford to be coming back for another, it'll be his second year under the gun. I think. Last year he had tremendous experience. I think he's pretty cool, calm, and collected. So I think that's exciting times for Penn State football. I think in 5 years, I'd love to see a college football playoff berth.
Yeah, no, I think it's certainly possible. And they've got, the big question for them on offense will be, their ability to find receivers other than Pat Fryermuth. Losing KJ Hamler wasn't helpful, but Jahan Dotson ought to be pretty good. Daniel George, they've got guys. But the good thing about that they've done with recruiting is they're really in a position to reload every season. That's kind of what Ohio State does. That you lose a guy, you lose a Braxton Miller, you've got a Justin Fields, you lose a Chase Young, you've got another guy right behind him. So yeah, if you're Penn State, you feel pretty good about this year. They just have to actually play first.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to get into that in a little bit. We're going to get into James Franklin and his record in big games and whatnot, but we'll touch on that in a little bit. I want you to just give us a little bit of an overview of what you do on a day-to-day basis as you write for statecollege.com. For maybe somebody that watches this later, for maybe there's a student that says, I'd like to get into journalism or whatever it is. Just give them a little synopsis of what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, well, I would say in the season is a little different than out of season, kind of obviously. The nice thing about in season is it's pretty regimented. The weeks are pretty much the same. Monday for the most part, there's not a lot to do. Maybe some follow-up columns from the game before. Tuesday, James Franklin's got his press conference, so you go to that. You write some stories off of that. And then throughout the week, there's some phone calls and conference calls with players or assistant coaches. Wednesday, we get to go to a little bit of practice, about 10 minutes at the end of practice. That's really the thing. If anybody asks, if you ever talk to someone that covers Penn State and you ask them, what'd you see at practice? And they tell you anything, they're lying to you because we don't see enough practice to really have any sort of scoop. Every once in a while you see something, but for the most part, not so much. I mean, they will dress injured players when they know the media is coming that night, so nobody knows that guy's injured. Like when KJ Hamler got hurt, they kind of faked it, that he was perfectly fine. And he did end up playing, but he wasn't totally So that's Wednesday. Thursday, more conference calls, and then Friday is sort of the calm before the storm, if you will. But I would say, on a net average on a day to day, you get up. There's a lot of checking Twitter. There's a lot of figuring out what you're going to do because really, there's so many people that cover Penn State that it's really a matter of, can you be creative with the access that you have to write something different than what everybody else does? Because really, when there's 40 people at a game, we probably travel 25 or 30 people to every single game as a media contingent. So there's only so many ways to skin that cat, and you've got to figure out the most, sort of unique way to do it. And then game days, if it's at home, we'll say it's a noon kick. I'll probably get up at 7 or 7:30, try and get over to the stadium by 9 o'clock, watch the game, write about the game. You're probably out of there 4-ish hours after the fact, depending on, how you go about your job. And then there's more stuff to do when you get home. But yeah, out of season, it's just really a matter of keeping an eye out for stuff. It's been different this summer since we can't, be in the same room as anybody else and stuff like that. But for the most part, yeah, it's just keeping an eye out, talking to people, and finding ways to be creative.
Now, during the season, are you on the field for the press pass every single game?
We get the last 5 minutes of the game. Beaver Stadium sideline's pretty small, so they have a lot of recruits and lettermen and stuff. Other places in the Big Ten, you can go on the field beforehand for pretty much all the pregame, and then you have to go to the press box. But, when I'm in the game for the majority of the time, I'm up on the 45-ish yard line, up in the press box, eating way too many cookies, and being a lot warmer than most of the people that are in the stands. And I never get rained on, which is a plus.
That is a plus. Now, you're not paying for those cookies, right?
No, it's all, the amount of stuff that you get in the press box, cookies, mashed potatoes. They used to do breakfast. That was the best thing about noon kicks is they would do like bacon and eggs, hash browns and stuff for breakfast, and then they'd have a lunch, and then there's something afterwards. Because really, for most games, you can be spending 12 to 15 hours in that press box between before, during, and after the game. So they take care of you. Some places like Michigan State, a couple of years ago when they had like a 3.5 hour long rain delay, Michigan State just gives you vouchers, and your voucher is good for like a hot dog or a pretzel. And when you have the whole lead up to a game, and then you have a rain delay, and then you've got after the game, and all you've got is 2 pretzels. It was like the Donner Party up there trying to barter away for different things. And I'll transcribe your quotes if you give me a pretzel voucher. So it was definitely experience, but by and large, we're taken care of very well.
That's great. What away stadium has the best food?
It's a good question. Probably Ohio State. I mean, all the places that do a really good job. Ohio State probably gets a little bit higher, just because they have like free McDonald's Frappuccinos, free slushies. The first time I ever went to Rutgers was the first Big Ten game that Rutgers had in the Big Ten, somewhat obviously, I suppose. And they had a guy with a chef's hat carving roast beef for us. So, it can get pretty nice because they want you to go. I mean, we're not giving them any money, but some of those places can get pretty nice. And there's a reason why when you look at so many sports writers, they're either fat or alcoholics. So like one or the other of those things, tends to come out of people. And I tend to opt for the slushies.
There you go. Folks, we're here with Ben Jones, StateCollege.com, athletics beat writer. Thank you, Sheets, run and done. Now, do you go to all the away games, Ben?
Yeah. I've been to pretty much every away game for the last 4 or 5 years, and this is just the full-time period, and then I've been for a few when I was part-time, and then I've been to every bowl game since James Franklin got the job.
Wonderful. So let's get on with just another topic. I saw this today. First positive COVID-19 test result was today for the Penn State athletics. Did Penn State release anything on that, where that came from, what sport that came from? We might be having a little bit of technical difficulties, Ben. Can you hear me?
Close. Lag in there for a second.
Okay. All right. Now I can hear you. Okay. Let's try that again.
All right, I think we're good. Yeah. I'm sorry. What was the question? Was about
Oh, I just said the first positive COVID-19 test result came
Oh
from
yeah.
Penn State Athletics today. Did they release anything on where that came from?
No, they haven't. I think there's a bunch of HIPAA stuff, and Penn State's just notoriously not particularly transparent about those sorts of things. But yeah, they did have their first test come back positive. They normally are going to release them every 2 weeks, so next Wednesday would be the next time that information comes out. But since the state reports it by zip code, and University Park has its own zip code, I wouldn't say they got caught, but it was, the information was there to be found, and they confirmed it.
Now, what is the protocol right now for the football team? Are they wearing masks 24/7, or what are they doing?
Yeah, pretty much they're wearing masks all the time. I'm not sure what they're going to do tomorrow. They can start doing on-field stuff. So I don't know if they'll be masked when the whole team is together, but they've been working out in smaller groups. They basically, which is the football facility, and when they have team meetings or position group meetings, they're doing it all virtually. The idea is, if Sean Clifford gets it, and then he could give it to all your other quarterbacks, and then you don't have a quarterback. It sounds a little drastic, but I think it's really just a matter of prevention because, the likelihood that Sean Clifford gets it's kind of low. But if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have a quarterback. So I think they're just being very cautionary. Testing wise, everybody got quarantined and tested when they came back to campus. But they'll only get tested while they're on campus if they show signs. I don't know if that'll change in the season because the Big Ten hasn't released its sort of mandatory protocols yet. But otherwise, once they get tested and are out of quarantine, they're pretty much heavily encouraged to stay in their apartments, or they've got some of these guys are in hotels to kind of keep them more separated.
But most of the athletes that are on the football team are in State College currently.
Yeah, I don't think the entire team is. They've been a little non-specific about that, but they've had about 70 to 100 guys come back, that's basically a travel roster to a home roster. There's always more guys on the team than they're actually, necessarily dressed. But for all intents and purposes, yeah, they're all back here.
So, folks, Penn State recently, well, not Penn State, but the Big Ten recently said they're just going to go only conference play this year for football. So we had this year on the agenda, on the schedule, September 5th was supposed to be Kent State at home. Then it was supposed to be Virginia Tech away, and then San Jose State at home, and then on with the Big Ten schedule. Do you know, Ben, if they're just eliminating those first 3 weeks and they're just going to start with Northwestern, or is the whole schedule going to be mixed up again?
If I had to guess, because I have to guess, I think they're going to redo the schedule. I get the impression just from some reporting that was done today by other people that they're not going to start the season on September 5th. They're going to kind of use some of those early weeks to ramp everything up and get prepared and then just do the conference schedule. The only reason I think that they're going to shift it around, especially if they add a 10th game, is I think there's an interest in them doing divisional games earlier on, maybe with some bye weeks in there. That way, if they have to stop or if there's a pause or something, you have enough of the divisional games done that maybe, you can send two teams to the Big Ten championship. I think their idea is if they've got to cancel the season early, they want to do it with something sort of answered rather than just sort of arbitrary cross-divisional games. So my guess is that they're going to scramble it again. But I believe the conference met again this afternoon to talk about stuff, but they're notoriously secret. So I imagine that we'll find out in the next couple of days what officially is going to happen.
Seems like a trend with, Penn State and the Big Ten and just college sports in general that they're very, very secretive on everything.
Yeah. There's a whole lot of it's sort of funny how different programs run things differently. On the one hand, football is very secretive. On the other hand, I've covered hockey for a really long time here, and people will just text you things, or basketball will be like, hey, there's a commitment coming this week, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. and then you just have to wait for it to happen. So some places are super secretive. Football, pretty much everywhere is super secretive. But the nice thing about covering teams that are not quite so paranoid is they're not quite so paranoid.
Now, let me ask you this, since you did mention the Big Ten Championship. Have you been to the Big Ten Championship?
Yes, I was there. Yeah, that was quite the experience.
Oh, it was unbelievable when they beat Wisconsin. My brother and I and a couple of buddies were there as well. And I wanted to ask a follow-up question with that. Did you go to St. Elmo's to try the famous shrimp cocktail sauce?
I actually did. We went a couple. We didn't go the weekend that we were there for the Big Ten title game, but Penn State had played at Indiana a couple weeks before, and when we were there that time, because when you go to cover Indiana, it's way better to stay in Indianapolis than to drive the extra hour to Bloomington. So we stayed in Indianapolis, went to St. Elmo's, and if you want to know why the newspapers are all going under, it's because they're all expense reporting, $50 steaks and $25 shrimp cocktails. But it was delicious. And yeah, if anybody goes to Indianapolis, you have to go there because it's definitely worth the poverty that comes afterwards.
Amen. My nose is actually running right now just thinking about that cocktail sauce. And I've talked about that cocktail sauce so many times on the show. I'm going to get some cocktail sauce on the show. And I think it may be something in the future where I'm going to try the cocktail sauce and some shrimp cocktail every single episode with the guest. I think that would be something that we should do in the future. I think that might not be a bad idea.
Yeah, it'd be like Hot Ones a little bit, but just like less aggressive.
Absolutely. And I recently found out, folks, of you in the Shenango Valley, that the shrimp cocktail sauce that is famous at St. Elmo's is available at the local grocery store called D'Onofrio. So if you're looking to try it, if you're looking to cough and feel like you're dying for like 30 seconds, that is the one for you. It'll clean you out and you will feel great after. But yes, you can get it at D'Onofrio's. So, Ben, let's move on here. Let's talk about, I saw this story just today when I was on staycollege.com, that Judge Culpepper, one of the defensive linemen for Penn State, is neighbors with Tom Brady now.
Yeah, it was not at all what I was expecting, but I was doing some Googling before we talked to him and saw, because his brother is a quarterback at Syracuse, and someone had done the story. But yeah, I mean, Tom Brady's next door. He bought Derek Jeter's house. His parents, or at least Judge Culpepper's dad, played 9 years, I believe it was, in the NFL. And then after that, Derek Jeter moves in. They were on Survivor. It's just a very weird life to lead. I can't imagine. I like my neighbor fine, but my neighbor is not Tom Brady, so I'm not sure what that would be like.
I saw that his dad and his mom, so Brad Culpepper, who played for the Buccaneers, he was a defensive lineman as well, and then his wife, Monica Culpepper, they were both on Survivor. I had no idea. There's definitely Survivor fans on the show here. They're viewing. If you love Survivor, we may actually have a Survivor contestant in a couple weeks. We're working on that. But yeah, that's just a very strange situation there. Very, very unique. Not too many people can say that they're neighbors with Tom Brady and that they were on Survivor as a couple as well.
Yeah, no, that is a whole bunch of bingo card boxes that I did not have checked off. That's for
sure. Well, the nice thing about a bingo card is there's always a free space, though. So you got that one, my friend.
That's true. You make a good point.
All right, so let's get on. Well, I'm going to read some things about James Franklin. I'm going to get your take on it. So James Franklin so far in his very short tenure at Penn State, 56-23, has won Big Ten championship in 2016. 2014, 7-6 was the record. 2015, 7-6. 2016, 11-3. 2017, 11-2. 2018, 9-4, and then this past year, 11-2. 1-5 versus Ohio State, with that only win coming at home when Grant Haley blocked that field goal, and then 2-4 versus Michigan, with both of those two wins coming at home as well. Do you think most of the fans so far are are satisfied with James Franklin's tenure, or do you think some fans are still wanting a little bit more? Are they reaching too far by saying, hey, he should win more big games, or hey, we should have been in the college football playoff by now? Are they reaching too far for that?
Um, I think overall people are satisfied with how it's gone. I think the thing that hurts him a little bit is the fact you look at the 2017 game at Ohio State, where Penn State is up. I think it was 21-7. They all kind of run together, but Penn State's up pretty substantially, pretty comfortably in the second half, going into the fourth quarter. They lose that game. That's probably the best team that James has had. Maybe, I mean, not even maybe, probably, top 3 or 4 teams that Penn State's ever had. You know, Penn State, most teams don't go into Columbus with any sort of lead at any point in the game, let alone a big one. They lose that game. That probably kills their playoff hopes. They were a title contender at that point. They lose to Michigan State the next week. You look at 2018, similar kind of deal back here in State College. They're up not as big, but comfortably in the third quarter, going into the fourth quarter. Then JT Barrett does what not JT Barrett, excuse me, but they come back. They find a way to win. So Penn State loses that game. You really look at it, Penn State could say that it won 3 games in a row against Ohio State, which basically nobody, other than, I mean, Clemson hasn't played them 3 times in a row, but, there's a very rarefied air of teams that have been able to beat Ohio State consistently. So I think in that light, when you look at where Penn State is as a program, you say, they're very, very good, and they're at the point where they ought to win 9 or 10 games without a lot of trouble every year. But when it comes down to that Ohio State game, that Michigan game, I think fans realize you're not going to win every single one because those teams are too good to beat them all the time. But when you've got 2 games in the bag, you start to feel like maybe you've got to find a way to win those games. I don't think last year was a big of a deal because I think everybody knew, despite how high Penn State was ranked, that Ohio State was just a better team. I think they pretty much proved that. Penn State made it closer than it probably was with some of those fumbles. Again, Micah Parsons and Lamont Wade. So I think on the one hand, it's hard to really complain about the job that James Franklin has done because he's done about as good as you can do without doing that last step. But at the same time, you want to go to the playoffs, you got to win your division, you got to win the Big Ten. He's just a little unlucky that maybe the best team in college football or one of the top 3 best teams in college football the last decade just happens to also be in that division as well.
Yeah, anytime you have Saquon Barkley, I mean, like you mentioned that Ohio State game, anytime you have Saquon on your team, you think that you should win every single one of those games looking back. That Ohio State game was tough at Ohio State. And then, like you said, with Dwayne Haskins at home against Ohio State, that comeback there, I was at that game. We didn't talk on the way. We left right after that game. My buddies and my brother and I, we didn't talk for like 45 minutes. We just couldn't believe what happened. That was an unbelievable comeback by Ohio State. But I think Penn State let that slip away. But you could hear a pin drop in that stadium at the end when Penn State lost. So, folks, looks like there may be a tad bit of technical difficulties. You're back with us, Ben. That's good. But yeah, I mean, like you said, any you're running into a juggernaut every year against Ohio State. You're going to win some of those. You're going to lose some of them. But I did see a stat that I believe it was that Penn State, Clemson, Ohio State, and Oklahoma are one of 4 teams to finish like in the top 12 in the final poll at the end of the year in the last 4 or 5 years. So, I mean, that bodes well for James Franklin. A lot better than a few years before. So, looks like Ben Jones is left. He must not like the interview. No, we just have some technical difficulties, folks. I'm going to try to bring him back in. But, that's what happens sometimes with technology. Like I said before on the show, Tom Brady and Howard Stern, they had a difficulty on their show one time. It was like going on for 45 minutes. The connection was bad. Then finally they got it right. So, Ben, can you hear me now?
There we go. Yeah, I plugged my phone in and immediately all went to hell. So that was never charge your phone. That's a horrible idea.
Never charge your phone ever, folks. You heard it here, Ben Jones. So, Ben, I'm going to move on to something that I found pretty interesting today about college football in general and Penn State football. And I think this was somebody from State College as well, Mike Portman, who talked about the profitability of Penn State football, et cetera. And it said the profit for the 2018 to 2019 season for Penn State football was $45 million. So $45 million was the net profit, with the gross being $164 million, $37 million from tickets, and $34 million from media rights. It'll be very, very interesting to see what happens after the season. I personally, I was on the show with Mike Adams, who's from the Shenango Valley. He played for the Steelers and he played for Ohio State. But I was talking to him, and I know that players can make money off of their likeness. I believe it's in 2023. But just reading those stats right there and seeing how much money these colleges make just off of football, I think that athletes are going to kind of realize, well, wait a second, without this huge cash cow being football, we have some major leverage in the university, and we can kind of say what we want after this year. I think that might happen.
Yeah, I think players have always kind of known that they've had the leverage. I think the hard part about it is that they don't have representation. There's no collective bargaining agreement. There's no players union, and part of that is because so many of these guys, Micah Parsons, assuming that he goes pro after this season, which seems like a safe bet. Micah Parsons is in college for 3 years and then he's gone, and it's hard to get all of these guys on the same page. It's hard to, not that they don't care, but to a certain extent you're here and then you're somewhere else, and then those problems are different. But there's no doubt, I think when you look at the situation that everyone's in right now, where you go, the people that are really giving up the most are getting compensated the least. How do you manage that? How do you manage that going forward? And the argument from the NCAA has always been, these guys are amateurs. They can't get paid because it causes recruiting trouble, or it doesn't. Ideally, you want everybody to be balanced, but once you start paying people, then it creates economic disparities that probably already exist anyway. It just, all these problems, but it's hard to look at what they're trying to make these guys do. And this is true for, female athletes in Olympic sports as well, or male athletes in Olympic sports that are going through all of this as well, that, they're the most important piece of the puzzle, and they're not getting a whole lot for it. You can say, yeah, scholarship's great and room and board and all of that, but, you hear time after time guys that are trying to, make ends meet for, winter clothing. Not everybody that, Jamari Wheeler plays with the basketball team. He's from Florida. He might not have a winter coat. He still has to get it. School can't give it to him. So how do you navigate that? Maybe, you want to send money back home, but you're not allowed to get a job because there's rules about that. So how do we compensate these guys in a way where, there's still a level of amateurism and the stuff that everybody likes about college football, but at the same time, you look at this and go, if they all decided not to play tomorrow, everyone would have to listen because they're the most important piece of this puzzle.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that will change shortly. I mean, that's a good step in the direction that they can actually make some money off of their likeness. Folks, don't quote me on that, but I believe it is somewhere like 2022 or 2023 where they can do that. But yeah, I mean, Mike Adams even talked about on the show a couple weeks ago how, okay, well, maybe you don't have, other meals on your meal card because you use it too much. It's just like things like that are just absolutely insane. And you're thinking to yourself, what? Like that happens? Most people are like, oh, like you need to, that don't know, most people that don't know about it are like, oh yeah, you need to keep college. Well, when you look at all these stats and you realize how much money is being made off of the player's likeness, it starts to, it's sickening when you think about it, that some of that stuff goes on where some players can't even, utilize the meal card because it's, because they got 3 meals that day and they want to afford. I mean, things like that are just crazy. So I hope it begins to change, and I think it is. We have a question here for you, Ben. It says, your best interview you've ever done.
The best interview, that's a good question, because I suppose it depends on whether you mean like whether someone means the most interesting person or like the best resulting story. I think if I think of interviews, probably the 3 that come to mind off the top of my head. I interviewed Saquon before his sophomore year at the Lash Building, And he was just, I think the thing that makes Saquon such an interesting guy is uh, he's almost not aware how good he is. And I don't know if that's changed, over the years, because I saw him last summer briefly. But he just never seemed to fully grasp, A, how good he was, and B, how famous he was. And it was just very interesting because you're not used to that. And that's not to say that, good Penn State football players or athletes are normally all about themselves, but he was just a very down-to-earth guy. So that interview was cool. I always remember that he had something on his phone, and I couldn't remember what, like, I was trying to write it down, and I couldn't remember, and I was like, can you hand me your phone so I can write it? And he handed me his phone, and, like, I don't want to hand my phone to my parents, like, let alone, like, a stranger. And it was just, like, and that just, I always remember that. It's such a weird thing because it's such a small detail. So I think of that. I've done some interviews with James Franklin that I've been proud of, that we've talked about, race and stuff away from the field, and he's been open about it, and we have a good, working relationship because of that. And when I was in Orlando for the Citrus Bowl, I drove down to Tampa to interview Joe Moorhead when he was still the head coach at Mississippi State, because Joe and I had, and still, I actually talked to Joe a couple weeks ago, have like a good working relationship. So I did stuff with him. So those three probably come to mind. There's always ones that surprise you. Maybe they're a little more interesting than you thought they were going to be, or the story was pretty good. But yeah, Saquon, some of the stuff I've done with James, and catching up with Joe Moorhead are probably the ones that come to mind off the top of my head.
That's something you love about a really, really, really talented athlete, when they're A, so genuine like Saquon is, and B, when they're so involved with their work ethic and just preparing, that you are right. It seems that they just shrug off, all the other attention that comes with it. And Saquon seems like a very, very genuine, like down to earth guy, which is awesome to see.
Yeah, no, it pains me that he has to play for the Giants, because I have to really root against him, because he's a great example of, I don't root for Penn State. I don't necessarily root for players, but there are guys that you come across that are legit dudes, and you see them. I remember when Saquon got his first carry, and you watch him go from being someone that nobody knew to being, to a certain extent, one of the faces of the league. So it's hard not to, you want to see him do well for himself and for that story. But at the same time, if he could fumble it against the Eagles, that wouldn't break my heart either. So, it's a little give and take there.
Folks, we're on the Zip Code with Ben Jones, Penn State Athletics beat writer for statecollege.com. Sheets run and done. Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to go to the Sheets convenience store there next time in State College. I walked past it. I hate to say that. Sheets might be, taking this banner down after they just heard that. But I did walk past it. I took a Snapchat of it. I sent it, I put it on my story. Everybody saw that I walked past the Sheets store, no gas station, but I did not go in. So next time in State College, I got to go in that store. I got to go in there.
Yeah, and you got to go to the roof. You got to go have a date up there just for me.
You know what, Ben? I hope you are correct. I hope that I have a date on the Sheets roof. I'm going to make that happen. I'm going to make that happen.
I believe in you.
So, oh, by the way, if you can ever get Saquon on the Zip Code, Ben, just let me know. Just shoot me a text.
Yeah, I'll pull a couple strings.
Appreciate it. We're going to move on to, folks, if you have any other questions for Ben, go ahead and put them in the chat. I'll get to them later on in the show. We do have a couple more topics we're going to discuss. We've got the buy or sell coming up. But right now, we're going to do the rapid fire round. So, Ben, I'm going to give you just a bunch of random questions. You're going to answer them as fast as you can. We got guys like Jawan Johnson. He did a great job on the rapid fire round. We got Joe Crispin. He did a great job on the rapid fire round. David Jackson, Penn State basketball. He did a great. So, we got a bunch of guys that really aced this. So, hey, no sweat. All right. I heard you're clutch. You're a clutch. So you got this.
All right. I believe in myself.
Okay. Ben Jones on the Zip Code, rapid fire round. Here we go. Best football atmosphere besides Beaver Stadium?
Iowa.
Coolest interview you've done?
Saquon Barkley.
Best basketball atmosphere.
Rec Hall.
Favorite Disney movie.
Mulan.
Favorite state college restaurant.
Oh man, gonna get me in trouble. I'll say local whiskey.
That is a great place. They got great fries there, man. They used to call it, I forget what they called it when I was at Penn State, but we had it. It didn't even have a name yet. They didn't even have a sign out. Some people were calling it the second. Some people were calling it Clover. They were calling it Clover. That's what I like to call it, Clover. But you're right, local whiskey. Okay. Back to the segment. Best sports movie.
Cool Runnings.
Amen. That's my favorite movie of all time, Ben. You're passing this with flying colors. Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Book or a movie?
It depends. Good book is not the same thing as a good movie, but good movies are easier.
Favorite food?
Grilled cheese.
Fruits or vegetables?
Depends if my mom's watching this. Fruits.
Dogs or cats?
Still dogs.
One Penn State football player we should be on the lookout for.
Oh boy, it's the one that I should know the answer to. Jesse Luketa.
Favorite band or artist growing up?
Metallica. Once Upon a Time.
One thing you're afraid of?
Spiders.
PC or Mac?
Mac.
Grass or artificial turf?
You can't beat good grass.
Penn State football home or away jerseys?
Oh, that's tough. I think I like the all white better. So I'll go with, I guess that's away. Yeah, that's away.
And this will be the most important question I ask you all night long, Ben. Where will the zip code be in 5 years?
I'm going to think of a very clever answer. A Twitch affiliate. Does that count as like...
That counts as an answer. With that, Ben Jones, you are done with the rapid fire round on the zip code. Does Penn State still have the best turf management program in the country?
Yeah, I think so. I think they've got a couple guys doing one of the U.S. major sites a couple years ago, and I think they've got somebody at the Master. They've pushed out some pretty high quality guys, and it definitely shows at Beaver Stadium because that field, for the amount of pounding that it takes in that weather, is in pretty great shape.
Oh, it's so pristine. It's unbelievable. Let me get to the question you answered for the best basketball atmosphere. Do they still have a game at Rec Hall every single year? Or was that only a few years ago against, I think they did, what, was it against Princeton?
Yeah, they did one against Princeton, and then they did one more that for the life of me, I can't remember who they played. But I know when the Fab Four played there, or the Fab Five, excuse me, way back in the day, I think it was Chris Webber said that was like, they should never, ever leave Rec Hall. And I have not been – actually, I'll change my answer. I'd say the Palestra in Philadelphia because that's basically the same building except they still play there. So the Palestra is fantastic. Rec Hall is fantastic. The Jordan Center can be all right, but, for the most part, it's a large garbage can the rest of the time. So,
Who plays the Palestra?
A couple different teams do, but for the most part, it's technically Penn's home court. But like some of the Philly schools play there as well on a non-regular basis.
And I've said this maybe ever since they started playing, maybe one game every few years at Rec Hall. It was cool to see them do that because you look at a team like Duke. I mean, could they fill thousands and thousands of more seats in their arena? Absolutely, no doubt. However, that atmosphere is so loud with the students there. It builds and builds and builds. And I wish that they would do that with Rec Hall. But, once they see the money coming in from, they sold out a bunch of games this year at the Bryce Jordan Center, it's hard for them to go back to the Rec Hall. But just for like an atmosphere, I would love to go C game at Rec Hall. I hope to do that. And I hope they play more games there because you are right. That's a great atmosphere.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of the thing that got right.
Folks, I think we're having a little bit of technical difficulties again with Ben. One of the other things he said that was very interesting, best football atmosphere besides Beaver Stadium, Iowa. We have heard that from multiple people. So if you are a huge Penn State football fan, or you're watching this and you just like college sports, or you like college football, or just go to an Iowa night game, that is something special. I've heard that's special. I've heard, I mean, these are Big Ten teams, but I've heard at Wisconsin is special. And then a lot of people say you got to get to the Big House as well. Something else that people have said is a pretty crazy atmosphere is Mississippi State. And then another cool atmosphere people have said is Virginia Tech. Now, obviously, there's a bunch more, but Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia, which it's sad because Penn State was going to play at Virginia Tech this year, but that's not going to happen due to the virus. So, folks, when Ben gets back on here, we'll let him join. But we got one more buy or sell segment with Ben, and then we are going to wrap up the show by talking just a tad bit of Penn State basketball. So maybe Ben's phone died, or I mean, who knows? But thank you guys for supporting the Zip Code. Don't forget, we have a giveaway coming up in a couple days. You're not going to want to miss that giveaway. It is significant. Sheets run and done. Thank you for the Sheets sponsorship. And I like what Ben said. I think I'm going to have to go on a date at that Sheets convenience store on the rooftop. I think I'm going to have to do that. I'm going to have to make that a point. There's a Sheets convenience store in State College with no gas station. So, like I said before, I think it probably is one of the only ones in the country, in the world. And I'm going to fact check myself on that. But I believe it is one of the only ones. So, if you are watching right now, here comes Ben. We're going to get back with Ben Jones here. And we're going to ask him a few buy or sell questions before we're done. We got about 8 minutes of the show left. So wait till Ben joins. We'll go with the buy or sell. Then we'll talk a little about Penn State basketball. Ben, you with us?
Yeah, but my phone said it was too hot. Our conversation was too spicy. It was thermometer. It was like, calm yourself. It's like,
Conversation's way too
that
spicy,
man. I've
man.
never seen that. Yeah.
And no problem. Sometimes that happens like when you're out in the heat. But so we're gonna go with buy or sell, but I wanted to just ask you real fast. What's crazy about that Iowa atmosphere? I got to get out there sometime. I've heard that from multiple people.
Yeah, it's just it's packed in. It's right on top of you. I think that's the thing cool about it versus, some of those really big stadiums are so big that there's people off in space and they don't really feel engaged with every corner of the stadium is there, but it's not so small that it's not intimidating. It's just they love their football. Granted, both times I've been there, Penn State really good, and Iowa always shows up for night games. It is just intense. They're loud, and Iowa is a tough out when they're playing under the lights.
Yet another atmosphere. I just told the viewers while you were gone for a second, I was looking forward to going down to Blacksburg, Virginia this year to see Virginia Tech play Penn State. I'm sad that's not going to happen, but I heard that's another great atmosphere. So we're gonna get on with the buy or sell, Ben. And the first one, buy or sell, Penn State football makes the college football playoff for the next 5 years.
I'll buy.
Penn State basketball will make the NCAA tournament in the next 5 years.
I would buy that too.
Penn State hockey wins a national championship in the next 5 years.
Next 5, I think I'll sell, but I think they'll make the Frozen Four in the next 5 years.
Pat Chambers is still the head coach of Penn State basketball in 5 years.
I think I'll sell, but at this point, I could buy that, and it would be hard to argue. So,
James Franklin beats Ohio State multiple times in the next 5 years.
I'll buy that because Justin Fields is going to go after this year. So that's a quarterback change. Yeah, I'll take 2 wins out of the next 5 years.
And the last one, Penn State football will have names on their jerseys again in the next 10 years.
I will sell that. That's not happening.
Good. I'm glad you sold that. Yeah, I think that was a very interesting experiment there with O'Brien. You know, so many people hated that. I don't know how they kept it for as long as they did.
Yeah, but you know, differs.
Yep, very true, very true. All right, Ben, we only got about 4 or 5 minutes left, but I do want to ask you this. I have Pat Chambers' record here for basketball, and it's 148 and 150 overall. I mean, yeah, they were going to make the tournament this year. I think they could have made a run in the tournament this year, but 2011 to 2012, 12 and 20. 12 to 13, he was 10 and 21, 13 to 14, he was 16 and 18, 2014 to 2015, 18 and 16, 2015 to 2016, 16 and 16, 2016 to 2017, he was 15 and 18, and then 2017 to 2018, 26 and 13, 2018 to 2019, 14 and 18, and then 2019 to 2020, he was 21 and 10, and I think they were going to make a run. So, I mean, in the next 5 years, I think it's going to be very interesting what happens with Pat Chambers. I think, hopefully they can make the NCAA tournament in the next couple of years and make a run. I do think for his resume, that's sad what COVID did with this team, because this team was a good-looking team. They could turn it on when they needed to. I know they had a cold stretch at the end of the season, but, I think you're right. I could see it going both ways in 5 years for Pat.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot to be said about the record. I think, to a certain extent, you're looking at a team that's a little bit like Rutgers or Maryland. In football in the Big Ten, you go, here's Big Ten basketball. It's probably, arguing with the ACC every year about which conference is the best. So you've got to build a non-existent program against a bunch of really, really good, high-powered traditional programs. So it takes a couple of years to get those inroads in Philly. Penn State never really recruited Philadelphia until Pat got to Penn State. They get into Philadelphia. They get some good talent. They sort of build it up. They've been, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, they lost 8 or 9 games by 6 or fewer points. I mean, we're talking 1 or 2 possessions here, some free throws. So they've been right there. And I think you saw last season that when they put it all together and they have all the right pieces, there was a point in the season where, it was insane to say out loud, but there was no reason that Penn State wasn't playing as good a basketball as anyone in the country. At one point, they were very, very good. They were making all their shots. They've always played good defense. So the formula works. The question is, how much time do you want to invest into that formula? So I think really when you talk about the Pat Chambers era, you've got to look at the last 4 years or so more than the ones that led up to that. And certainly there are some things in there that you could point fingers at and say that could have been better. But I think when it's all said and done, there's an argument to be made for the amount of money they want to spend on basketball at Penn State. They're maybe getting more than what they've invested at this point. And I think if Penn State basketball is a perennial 500 team in the conference, finishing in that, 8 to 6 to 5 range in terms of standings on a regular basis, and then occasionally making a push for the top. If you're Sandy Barber, that's probably a proposition that you're going to take, because you're never going to be Wisconsin, you're never going to be Michigan State, you're never going to be Michigan, not unless a lot of things change, and there's no indication that that's going to happen.
Yeah, Ben, we got about 40 seconds before Instagram kicks us off. So I want you to answer this last question in 10 seconds because it just popped up. Where can I get a book about Penn State hockey?
Amazon, Happy Valley Hockey, and it's about Penn State hockey, and I wrote it, which is why you should read it.
There you go, folks. Folks, thanks for watching the Zip Code. Ben, thanks for coming on. We hope to talk to you soon. And everybody, always remember that the Zip Code is going to be here for the long term, and we're going to keep having fun with the show. Love you, Shenango Valley. Ben, thanks for coming on, and we'll talk to you soon. Don't
All
forget
right,
about the
sounds good.
giveaway,
Thanks for having
guys.
me.